Good evening and welcome. My name is Mike Babin, and I'm the president of the HKVCA, the Hong Kong Veterans Commemorative Association. I'm very proud to be the son of a Hong Kong veteran, Alfred Babin of the Royal Rifles of Canada. Tonight's presentation is one in a series of virtual events to be presented by the HKVCA. Our goal is to bring you a speaker each month who will present some aspect of the Battle of Hong Kong, the experiences of the prisoners of war, and of the POWs' lives after the war. And we hope that in each event, there will be information that is new to you. Let me put in a word for our next presentation. And that is going to be on Monday, May 17th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Our topic that evening will be Finding War Relics in Hong Kong. Our speaker will be Craig Mitchell, and Craig will be speaking live and direct from Hong Kong. He will discuss how he and his colleagues searched for such things as ammunition, badges, and other artifacts lost during the Battle of Hong Kong, and researched their origins. In many cases, they've been able to return the relics that they find to the families of the soldiers who lost them. Please be sure to mark your calendars for this fascinating talk. Around the beginning of May, you'll receive an email invitation from the HKVCA with a registration link for the event, and I hope you'll register. Remember, these events are open to everyone, so please forward the invitation to your family and friends and encourage them to join us. Now let's turn to this evening's presentation. I'll introduce tonight's speaker, Sam Chiu, in a moment, but first I'd like to give you a bit of information about how this virtual event will work. As you've probably already discovered, the camera on your device is not activated and your microphone is muted, so nobody can see or hear you. With our large audience, we felt that this was the best approach to take. But you will have the opportunity to ask questions of our speaker, both during and after his presentation. At the bottom of your screen, you should see an icon marked Q&A. If it's not there, try tapping your screen once or moving your cursor to make it appear. You can use this icon to send a text message with your question at any time during the presentation. When you've typed your question, just tap Close to return to the presentation. At the end of his talk, Sam will answer the questions that you've submitted. And we've also set up a Facebook page for you to discuss the presentation and ask further questions of Sam. And I will tell you more, about this in more detail later. Now let's turn to our speaker for this evening. I'm very pleased to introduce Sam Chiu. Sam was a practicing engineer in the automotive plastics industry before returning to university to receive his MBA and his PhD. Before his retirement, he worked at the Executive Development Program at the University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management. Sam is a serious philatelist, a stamp collector. He has for years been deeply involved both as a collector and in holding executive positions in various philatelic organizations. He not only collects stamps and related items, but is a prolific exhibitor for which he has received over 120 medals in national and international exhibitions. He also acts as an accredited judge for competitions, and he served for 6 years on Canada Post's Stamp Advisory Committee. Sam has a particular interest in the postal history and stamps of China and Hong Kong, and in postal stationery, airmail, and various other themes, including bats and frogs. So welcome, Sam, and please go ahead.
Thank you, Mike. So let me share. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining my presentation. This is a passion that I have. I have many collecting passions, and one of it is Canada's Sea Force. As a young Boy Scout running around in Hong Kong, my troop went and was at the Saiwan Cemetery. I guess at that young age, it really got me. It cast a very strong impression why so many young Canadians went to Hong Kong and defend Hong Kong in the Battle of Hong Kong. So, and maybe it was for that reason that I decided to come to come to Canada to further my study. This year will be my 50th anniversary here in Canada. So, as a disclaimer, I do not have a degree in history. My PhD is in international management. This is just a hobby that went really serious. So for tonight, I want to present to you 5 parts of it, a very brief introduction. For example, last month, John Reed has an excellent presentation already, so I would not go into the details of the Battle of Hong Kong or the reason why Canada sent 2 battalions to Hong Kong. And so I will skim through that. In the second part of it, I would try to go over most of so-called postal history of the Sea Force in Hong Kong, starting when they were just a militia unit as Y Force in Jamaica. So that's a forerunner. And they came back. And then on October, they start the trip to Hong Kong via Vancouver. And I will show you postal history items after they arrive in Hong Kong. And after the start of the Battle of Hong Kong, their mail were detained. So this is on one side of the mail coming into Canada. I will also show you the return mail where family and friends tried to send mail to their loved one in Hong Kong, which were by then blocked. And last but not least is the POW mail from Hong Kong and Japan. Now, I had the good fortune of able to buy what I thought may be intact collections from several of these members of Sea Force, and what I would present those to you. So Benton is from the Winnipeg Grenadiers, Dowling is from the Corps of Signals, and Leicester is from the Royal Rifles of Canada. So this is one of the presentations that I made to many groups already. And for those that they don't know, they ask the question, what is Sea Force, what is Force C, and so on. But to me, those are the names, different names that is attached to the same unit that we're going to talk about. As I've said before, John already covered a lot of the history of the start of the war. Now, with respect to the philatelic side or the postal history side, we know that 1975 men went set sail on the Awati and the HMCS Prince Rupert, and they left Vancouver October 27. They then make stop in Honolulu, November the 2nd, and Philippines on November the 15th, reaching Hong Kong on November 16. Now, this is for somebody who doesn't collect or philatelist. This may be information that is useful to you. So for us postal historians, looking at a cover, we could extract a lot of information. For example, with the cancel, we could know the date, time, and location of the origin. We know who the originating censor would be. In this case, it's Lieutenant Kerrigan. And we know who the receiver and the addresser is. On the back of the cover, usually the sender would have his name, number, and then actually his unit as well. Now, we will go into this detail later, passed by Censor 137, and then we would also go into some detail on when it came into Canada, it was censored again, and this time in Ottawa. And for some of the covers, we would have a time of arrival. Usually this is not on covers. So what else could you extract from a cover? For example, this particular marking here, BR, is actually for the Bourne Road. So this is a cover that Dowling's family was sending from Canada to Sea Force through Japan, through the Japanese Red Cross in Japan, and this was delivered to Hong Kong. So another cover actually have the endorsement, while S.S. Grisham from New York. We will go into more detail later. And for this particular incident, Dowling was first put into the Bowen Row Hospital camp, but later he was moved to S, which is Sam Chiu camp. Now, many of the covers do not have any destination of what date this were received. This was lucky enough to have a marking. This particular cover was received in Japan. While others, for example, Dr. Crawford, he was such an important person that he was censored by 2 Japanese censors. As we could see the censors name chops, as they call it. So to start off with, before C-Force, the Winnipeg Grenadiers, they were posted as Y-Force in Jamaica. Why? Because the British Isles went into war and all the active soldiers were called back from the West Indies to serve in the British Isles. So Canada sent in replacement, and the Y-Force member was replacing the work of the soldiers there. So this is a pretty early cover where I think it was so early that the sender did not have to write his name on the back. However, it has a military censor marking, and a major could endorse that. Now, later in 1940, maybe in October, the system was set up better, where we could, on the back of it, we could see this was sent by Private Stanley Sims, and then it was censored by Major Kenneth George Bede. Just as as we know, especially if you look into the HKVCA website, just by putting the name in, you could easily trace the history of that particular member of the C-Force. So we know he was captured in Sam Chiu, then thrown into the North Point camp, which is Camp H. And then when everybody was transferred in September 42 into Sam Chiu camp, he was put there too. So he came back to Canada and passed away in a pretty decent age in March 1990. So forerunners. So more of when they were in C-Force. I was lucky enough to acquire this particular letter actually inside the cover. And inside the cover was it was addressed to Captain Morgan, but it was written by George Trish, who later was promoted to a major. By then he was just a captain. And the complaint he had at that point in time is the Jamaican authorities was charging tax on Canadian cigarettes that was sent to Jamaica. And okay, so I created this timeline on suggestion from Jerry Tuppett. So just to revamp, in 1940, June, the Y-Force arrived in Jamaica. By September 41, they came back to Winnipeg. So I just presented to you the 2 ships that went over, leaving Vancouver October 27th. Now, this particular couple, which have no stamps, and because of that, it is a pretty rare item because a lot of this has been thrown away. And the only way you could see it is on the back of it. If you flip up the flap, because the flap was covering, it shows the Royal Rifles of Canada active force, November the 2nd. November the 2nd was the date that the 2 ships arrived briefly into Honolulu and they then leave from Honolulu on his way to Hong Kong, and then before that, Manila. So, as Colonel Webb in his book, A Guide to Canadian Military Postal History, it actually documented there were at the ship, from the two ships, 3 mail bags or 150 pounds of mail were taken off in Honolulu and sent back via the U.S. Army PO into Canada. So October 27, C4 sailed from Vancouver. Arrival in Hawaii, Honolulu, November the 2nd, and then it arrived in Manila, November the 15th. On arrival in Hong Kong in November 16, we know that it was documented that there were mail taken back because the HMCS Prince Rupert only stayed for 3 more days. On November 19, it took back mail from Hong Kong back to Canada. So this particular cover, we have several people who study the postal history of the forces. This particular one, this marking, triangular marking, is actually a British military censor marking, and it starts from 101 onwards, where this particular one, 137, is assigned to the Winnipeg Grenadiers. This particular cover, as we can see, was sent by Private Johnson, and it was censored by Major Breed, as we have seen again. And so this was probably Johnson sending to a girlfriend, maybe in Regina. So we don't know. But the big deal for a postal historian is that my friend Richard Whittington, who does the census of the marking on what we have seen of recorded cover, this is the only one that we have seen that was used on a red ink pad for whatever it is. So this particular one, this particular cover was sent on November 28th. They arrived on the 16th. And by November 28th, this was carried, from our research, this was carried on the last transport leaving Hong Kong. That means mail that was sent by service mail from our from C4's member from like November 29th. There's some record of 29, but 30 onwards, they were detained. They never got to Canada. So just as a summary, the military, the British military markings, the censor marking, number 136 was assigned to the Royal Rifles of Canada. We just saw the 137, the lone example in red ink. The other examples are either in black or purple. Now, 138 is assigned for the third, and a lot of people don't know about this small troop because the two big battalion, the two big brothers, usually overcast. But there is the HQ company force, and 138 is assigned to it. And because of how small they are, there are very few of the 138 that has been recorded. Now, also Canadian were scattered into other camps as well. We mentioned BR, Baltimore Hospital. So only around 2 or 3 covers, or 4 C covers have been recorded that have other than the 136, 137, and 138 censor marking. There's 2 that was 113. So those were probably from the medical staff that was stationed, or the orderlies that were stationed at the Baltimore Hospital. And some of the officers was in the Central Command, which was 120. Now, after arrival in Hong Kong, I'll show you yet another one. Again, this was sent on the 28th of November. It was carried again on the very last, Japanese, before the Japanese, invasion. So, and this was written by Private Callis. So we know that Private Callis was missing in action on December 21st. So 2 days after Major Grisham and Master Sergeant Osborne, the lone VC recipient, was killed at Jardine Lookout. So MIA, as you would appreciate, which means that they usually could not find the body. When, unfortunately for the family, when this particular cover arrived in Burr, Quebec, as we can see from the marking here, Private Callis have passed. So filling in the rest, November 16th, C-Force arrived in Hong Kong. Our survey show the 20th, the first mail was recorded sent by C-Force. On those days, because November 19th, we know Prince Rupert departed with mail. November 29th was the last service mail that was sent by C-Force. If they were sent by airmail, the last C-Force mail that left Hong Kong was 30. So you could see there's only a span of 10 days roughly that the C-Force member could send mail when they arrived in Hong Kong before the war. So now we come to the mail that were trapped. Those that were sent after the last service transport or the last airmail that left Hong Kong. This particular one, it was dated December 7th. And as we can see, this was censored by Lieutenant Young, B Company, 137 again. And unfortunately, Lieutenant Young was KIA and, on December 21st. This particular cover was sent by Private Smith, and he was a POW, and he was strong enough to be sent by the Japanese afterwards to work in the nickel mine and refinery. His records show he passed away in 1966. Just as those covers that actually receive a marking in 1945, it was sent in 1941, it was received in 1945 because of this marking here. It was created deliberately to indicate that for the 3 years and 8 months, this cover has been trapped in Hong Kong. So as a postal historian, I could tell you that there's no registered cover during that period that has been found. Why? Because the Japanese was rifling mail. They were trying to, any register cover would have been destroyed by them. They would want to see if there is any valuables or any information. So we cannot find any register cover. So this particular one is from Major Breed, and he did self-censor. As you may already know, as an officer, you could self-censor your mail. So this is a pair of 2 covers that I bought, and my friend asked for the other one. So we now share each of them. Again, this was sent by December the 7th. During my collecting, I've been trying to keep an eye on what is the highest ranking officer that was a censor. And so far, it is the colonel. It's a colonel rank that has, so another detained in Hong Kong. The big deal about this for a collector is that it actually had 2 strikes. So as you can see, this was put upside down, and this particular one on the back is right side up. I've recorded every cover, every detained cover that have 2 strikes off the marking. We call those detained covers for the sake of ease. And this, in my record, is the only one that is assigned to the C-Force. So we see again who you could hardly see the censor, and it's Lieutenant Park. And the sender is Corporal George Montreux. So adding to the timeline, November 30 and afterwards, all surface mail would have been blocked by C-Force, and this would have been detained. December 3rd and afterward, all air mail would have been blocked and detained. December the 8th, which is the start of invasion at 8 a.m., this would essentially stop all mail. But actually, as you can see, the blockage of mail happened way before that. And December 11, Kowloon Peninsula fell, and Hong Kong became the Long Island. So let's go and take a look at the other side of the equation, which is mail sent from Canadian friends and family into the soldiers and the C-Force members in Hong Kong. Of course, they didn't know that it's going to be trapped. So this particular one was sent on October 31st. So the ship sailed from Vancouver October 27th. And this was on November 3rd. It got into Ottawa. And of course, they tried to send it back. They sent it to Hong Kong. By then, it was too late. By April 7th, there is this marking, which essentially returned the mail. And each of the mail would have this marking, which says, regrettably, the circumstances have made it impossible to forward this letter to destination. So this was sent back. Now, a similar cover by the same correspondent is recorded on October 27th. On October 27th is the day that the ships left Vancouver. So what does this show us? This shows us that most, if not all, Canadian C-Force member, after they left Vancouver, they never got any mail from their relatives in Canada. So just to add that even mail from as early as October 27th, mail from Canada was not deliverable to Hong Kong already. So after the war, when the so-called channel of communication started, we could see that the families were able to send, this was a particular instruction that they could send to K4C GPO in Ottawa, where in Ottawa, they would put a special stamp in their postage-free POW care of Japanese Red Cross Tokyo. This was how mail was sent to Hong Kong, to the POW camps. We're going to draw a bit more on the mechanism of this. So from this, we could see those block markings. Those are, it translates to Hong Kong POW camp, and this is censor, and this is a censor chart. This, we see the S sign for Sam Chiu camp, and we can usually see the 4-digit number that is assigned to a Canadian POW. So more to the timeline. And as postal historian, we start to record what was the earliest mail that the C-Force members were sent from camp. The earliest we could be able to trace was in late April. However, most of the mail, the first mail that came was actually from the first exchange of the diplomatic ship SS Grisham, when it arrived in NYC, and it brought in 650 items on August the 25th of 42. So by September, the North Point camp closed and everybody was sent to Sam Chiu camp. So this I took off the internet, which shows the second exchange of the Grisham and the Japanese ship Tia Maru in Goa. This was a second exchange. And if you understand part of the history, is that 2 of the nurses went with the 2 battalions. And it was in this exchange that the two nurses was brought back from Hong Kong, back onto the ship, and then back to repatriated back to Canada. So there was a question before this is, how was mail sent? What's the mechanism of mail that was directed to the POW camp? So there is very few pieces of information that we could trace. One of it, fortunately, was in 1945, somebody asked the district director of the Canadian Postal Censorship about the whole mechanism, and he wrote a 8-page report, I believe 8 or 9-page report. And in it, there is this sentence. I'm just not going to read everything. Essentially, Canada was not able to make any arrangements of direct mail between the POW, mail plus parcels, because the Japanese have no guarantee of the safety that this material, both the parcels and letters, would arrive in the POW camp hands in Hong Kong, and of course later in Japan. As we have read from other authors, that one of the ways that the Japanese were trying to demoralize our POW was that they deliberately took the mail that they received from Canada outside the camp. They would burn the mail in front of our POW just to get their spirits down. So from the same report, that the 650 items was only 650 items were received from the first SS Grisham in 42. 1 year after the fact that the second exchange, the number of mail went down to a mere 46 letters and cards. So this is the mail coming in as POW. So we know that it is only a trickle of mail. However, we know that there were other shipments of it not really documented, and it's very hard to, because there's no information. There was more that came in, but those were irregularly and through usually the Red Cross in Geneva. So another item that the timeline, so we could add, is that only 46 cards was a second batch that was received from the exchange of SS Grisham. Those were the only two that we know for sure that has been documented. So more mail from the POW in Hong Kong. At the start of the war, the Japanese was actually making covers. So the POW would write on POW stationery, and they would put this in, and then it would be censored by somebody. Now, unfortunately, this particular letter, the Japanese censor marking is underneath the label when they went to Ottawa to get the censorship. But we could probably see who it was if I ever tried to lift that. So in later times, just to make the process easier, only POW cards that could be easily, that they could easily censor. So no more, you cannot write it in the covers. Anybody could see this. So this, of course, is to Dr. John Crawford. And of course, Major John Crawford, is one of the four doctors that went with the forces. And just as a side, you may have heard that he was forced to make on, I guess, a shortwave broadcast over Radio Tokyo about camp life in Hong Kong. And about a dozen people or 15 people in the Western states got hold of this and wrote his wife about this. They were able to receive this message. On return, of course, he received his MBE, and then he passed away in June 1997. So what about mail that goes, that was in Japan? They were, again, just like any other mail, they were just sent in, taken prisoner, care of, they were all directed to Ottawa, and it was forwarded. And then the Japanese Red Cross would direct it to whatever. So because we know there were 3 shipments of POWs into Japan from Hong Kong to work as forced laborers. So this particular one, this has what we call a generic 3-letter, which only means censor marking. The telltale sign that this went into Hong Kong was, again, this S for Sam Chiu camp. So we know that this was received in Sam Chiu camp, and you could barely see, John Rutherford, who then wrote out, received March 20th. So as you can see, this was sent in March 42. It took a year to get into his hands in Hong Kong. So this particular cover was sent, actually, this was not sent to Hong Kong. The reason why is because of again, this is a generic marking which says censor. The Hong Kong marking usually have, the censor marking would have Hong Kong POW camp in there. And this one was lucky enough because very few of the covers was put with a Japanese receiving date. For us postal historian, this is gold mine. And of course, he himself, Rifleman Gage, wrote on the same that day that he had received it. Again, this was October 43. So just as aside, I usually only collect POW covers that goes into Hong Kong because those are very scarce. Our regional representative from BC, Jerry Tupper was telling me that one of the veterans was telling him that his family still holds something like 100 covers from their relative who were in the Japanese camp. So from what I could understand is, while in Hong Kong, the Japanese guards was using the treatment of destroying mail, maybe, just maybe, the Japanese in the Japan camp, the Japanese guard were letting mail going through or in. So there were 3, just to end this section, there were 3 transfer of POW camp to Japan. Now I'm going to show you the 3 correspondent that I was able to buy. The first one, correspondent I was able to get, was from Private Benton. I bought this around year 2000 or so. So this is what we know. He was wounded in action, 19th on the 21st, put into North Point camp, moved to Argyle, and then he was put into Sam Chiu camp again, and then he was somehow moved to North Point camp, moved to Sam Chiu camp, and he came back and passed away in 2003. So in the correspondence, there was around a dozen of the photos, very tiny photos of him in gear, all the way from when he was in Jamaica, and then he went. He has this photo was probably before his deployment. There was 2 of them, one in formal uniform and this one in battle gear, and I could only find 1 photo where he was in Hong Kong. So it took me quite some time, but this shadow, and you could see the brim of the helmet. This, I think, was Benton taking a photo. And of course, this is the iconic rickshaw puller in Hong Kong. Now, his correspondence contains of 5 POW cards. May I call your attention to the handwriting? They are pretty consistent. For us postal historian, we collect, those are 2 different printings of the cards. Take a look at the thick bars in this particular one. And if you can read Chinese, the fonts are different. So this is type 2 and type 3 of the printing. There's a first one, which the Benton correspondent doesn't have. Now, as you can see, the Japanese was against putting any dates on the material. So we need to I need to guess on what the dates are. But fortunately, there was one that somebody put a stamp on it, which wasn't necessary. So now take a look at the back. The handwriting on all of those 4 are similar to the one on the front, except this one. So this one is drastically different. So I was able to get Benton a cover. Take a look at the way he put L, the all in all. The L is literally an S shape. I was able to get one of his cover when he was a Y-Force members, and he was writing this as, so we know this is his handwriting. The other ones, we know the camps have scribes. These scribes would write because they have good handwriting, or when the soldier was too sick. So those would be, they would need the help of the scribes. The reason why it really attracted me is because of these 4 lists. It was Benton's handwriting in pencil of who were killed in action. This is the front and the back of list 1. So, Major Grisham, captain, and so on, and all the rank. So he has, if you could see on the back of my presentation, those are the 4. So he has the kill in action list. He has the missing in action list. Those to me, are treasures. This is when they died in hospital or MIA. And the last of them were during their interment. So that was the Benton. The Dowling correspondent. Dowling is the Royal Corps of Signals. I'm going to shoot this through because this is going to take a, I'm going into overtime. So anyway, Dowling belongs to the tiny force, the HQ force. So, and this is a completely different orientation. I was able to get the 4 letters that the family, usually I think is the mother, who sent to Dowling. So they were from very different angles. I've shown you already where the BL, at first when they were sent to Hong Kong, it was thought he was put into the BL Bourne Road Hospital, and then it wasn't. It was changed to Grisham, Shamsui. Now this is the scarce Grisham cover. Very few of the covers that the family was endorsing that they were sent to the Grisham via New York. So this is 2 more of the covers. Now the reason why this particular correspondent is really is wonderful is these 2 items here. Liberated prisoner of war mail. So the family were given those air letter forms after the war so they could immediately try to write to their loved ones. So this one was supposedly Manila via Melbourne, and it was crossed out. So we believe that he was already past Melbourne and he was on his way back to Vancouver. And on his return to Winnipeg, this is one of 3 types of card. The welcome home card by the reception committee. There was another similar one in Vancouver, and there's one in Brampton, Manitoba. Now, this particular flyer that was one side in English, the other side in Japanese, was scattered by mail or by air onto the POW camps. Now, Dowling wrote on this that he received this in pencil August 18, 1945 at 4 p.m. So this was a notice that they were finally free. The other thing that I got from him is his notebook. There's like 40 or 50 pages of drawing addresses and message from POW. I treat myself only as a custodian of this material because I don't want it to be scattered. So let me get this all together at one, and sometime later we would put it in a good museum or for future use. The last one is a different orientation, is from Lester. Now Lester is from Royal Rifles of Canada. I'm not going to go through all of this. And this is orientation in the sense that this was letters sent to his family. So Lester's father received this particular cover on January the 7th. So, the capitulation of Hong Kong occurred on the Christmas Day. And on January the 7th, you could see on the corner, the Royal Rifles of Canada was writing his father saying, unfortunately, your son is captured. We probably don't know. I don't have the letter. So this is what I guess the content would be. And then later letter, the cover is not here. In October, we got the letter that telling his father that, yes, he's now a POW. We confirm he's alive. He's a POW in Hong Kong. And in there as well was the note that the second strip of the Grisham, you could send mail and parcel to that. So this particular one is a complete set of the cover and the letter. And it says, your son has now moved to a Japanese camp. Of course, it didn't say it was a forced labor camp. Now, the last item was from Corporal No that's sent to, Lester. Lester have returned back home in Canada. And in one of the description, it said that Lester in his old age become a carpenter, and he was seen hanging around with his friend Eddie Campbellton. The reason why I bought Eddie Campbellton is because the person who's a philatelist who sold me that also know Eddie Campbellton. So just as a summary, I've tried to present to you in chronological order the postal history item when the Winnipeg Grenadier was when Y-Force in Jamaica as a forerunner, and mail en route to Hong Kong, arrival in Hong Kong, detained mail, return mail, and POW mail. I've also shown you 3 particular correspondence. One, the Benton correspondence, was Hong Kong POW cards that was sent to Canada. Of value was his handwritten casualty list and his photos in Jamaica. The Dowling correspondence was letter from families, to POW. He has the 2 rare liberated prisoner of war air letter and his welcome home card and his notebooks. So the last was the Canadian government's notice to POW families. So this was with Sgt McDonald when he was speaking at the University of Toronto on the anniversary in 2016. So as a collector, I want to leave you with this note. I get it. It was painful. People, people we talk to, they want to destroy all the evidence of the POW. We could not imagine the suffering and the torture they have gone through. They never want to have any memory of this, and everything got destroyed. But it is because of those letters and covers that postal historians like myself are able to try to piece the story, to build up the timeline, so we could leave a more complete story for future. So thank you for your attention. If you have any material, if you want to keep it fine, may I have a copy of the material so we could add to our knowledge of this. And thank you very much for your attention.
Sam, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. And I'm sure there was lots of new information there for for everybody. And I'm also sure that, that people will have questions to ask of you. So just a reminder, if you do have a question for Sam, you can ask it now, and do that by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You might have to tap on your screen to make it accessible to you, but then just to type in your question and then tap send. And while we're waiting for questions to come in, I'd just like to whoops, we're not there yet, tell you that we've set up a Facebook group for you to share information. Perhaps some of you have postal information, memorabilia from your Hong Kong veteran that you'd like to share with others, or that you'd like to show to Sam and ask questions of Sam about it. So we've set up a Facebook group to enable you to do that. So within the next 24 hours, you're going to receive a follow-up email from us, and it has two things in it. One is instructions on how to join that Facebook group that I just discussed. And the second is a link to a short survey. And we'd like to ask you to please take a minute, and that's all it will take. Take a minute to fill out the survey. We'd like to make these events as meaningful and as useful as possible to you. So we'd appreciate your feedback on that. So now, Sam, let's see what we have in the way of questions. So a question from Janet. She said, fascinating. How were you able to collect these letters?
There is a lot of auction houses that those are postal history item. I mean, postal history in terms that this is a cover on a letter sent to party A from party B and vice versa. So there's many auction houses, Canada, US, even Hong Kong, that knows that people collect this material. So I usually buy it one piece at a time. Now, the free correspondence was different. They weren't from an auction house. They were from friends that got to know that Sam collects this. Sam is pretty serious about this. So when they got hold of the correspondent, they approached me and say, Sam, could you offer the family or offer that particular person the money to buy it? And I said, yeah, sure, of course. I usually don't buy the single item anymore because it doesn't tell the story. As you can see from my presentation, those three particular correspondent actually has a lot of depth to it, which I really enjoy, that tells more about the particular C-Force member.
Okay, well, thank you, Sam. And Andrea had a similar question. Sorry, Cheryl had a similar question. Where do you find these materials? I think perhaps you've answered that question already, but Cheryl, if not, then please, please ask your question again. Question from Andrea. I have a couple of letters which I will unearth again that my mom had received, and also my dad's journal written while he was in Shemshupo. A lot was ripped out, whole pages, not sure who did that. She wants to know how she gets in touch with you. What's the best way to reach you? And actually other people have asked the same question.
Mike, you want to, I mean, my email is all over the place too. So Mike, if you could put my email in there somewhere.
Okay, I tell you what, when we send out the follow-up email tomorrow to everybody, it will have your email address in it. And I would also encourage people to join the Facebook group, HKVCA Virtual Events, because Sam will be monitoring that group for any questions that you might have, or materials that you might want to share with Sam and with others. Joanne had a question. What would be the rationale in allowing officers to self-censor their letters?
I guess they're officers, so they're officers. But even back from the Y-Force days, they have assigned a certain censor. So even officers sometimes go through an assigned censor. So what I didn't show you, I have two other correspondence, and as this particular title is the forerunner, I have a whole correspondence of Captain Grisham when he was as Y-Force, and it has from something like 7 different censors of his mail, including his self-censor.
Oh,
So,
okay. Sorry. Do you have any information? This is an anonymous question. Do you have any information on parcels received by the POWs? Did they all go through the Red Cross? Or if they were sent through the regular post, were they ever received? And the final part of the question, if they were received, were they received intact?
Generalized answer, no, they did not receive any of the parcels. No. Okay. A friend of mine was able to get actually in December, late December 1941, there was actually a one-page announcement from the post office that there is no parcel mail going to Hong Kong already, because they knew that there was the fall of Hong Kong. So that's part one. Part two of it was when the Grisham was the first Grisham, I guess it was set up there in a rush in August of 42. So there was probably no partial there. And from the letter that was later waiting for the second Grisham, it was actually delayed because there was supposed to be another ship in between, and there was supposed to be parcels there. So our record shows that 150 pounds of parcel was sent down to New York. Because there was no ship, it was given to the hospitals. So, and then afterwards, the second Grisham, there was absolutely no parcels. So short answer is no, they were never delivered.
Okay. Margaret says that, she says, I have all the letters that my parents wrote to each other along with the envelopes. I do not want to part with them. And I wonder if perhaps what she's asking is, are copies of these materials of any use to you?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so Margaret, if you can make copies of them and provide them somehow to Sam, he'd be grateful to have them.
Easiest is iPhone, or just take that and shoot it to my email. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Howard says, a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have about 30 3x5-inch paper cards that appear to be postcards that have orange Chinese script, as well as a stamp like a symbol in the upper left-hand corner. And that symbol is a dove sitting on a helmet. He says he also has some other materials he'd be more than willing to forward to you if that's of any value. That's
a Japanese military card, postal stationery, the dove on the helmet.
All right. Judy says, she's just making a comment. She says, my uncle W.A. Prieston was killed. It was on the killed in action list. Thank you so much for this very informative presentation. I shall share the information with my 90-year-old mother, the wife of Riley E. Prieston. As I said, that's from Judy Prieston. So thanks to you from her.
Judy, let's see if I could trace that on the casualty list and send you a copy of that. If you could email me, his name again. So.
Okay, and also maybe take a look on the Facebook page as well.
Yeah.
If you're into Facebook, Judy. Here's an interesting one. It's from Cheryl Mercer, addressed to me, wants to know if I have a daughter who went to Quebec High School in the 1970s. And sorry, the answer is no. I don't have any relatives that I know of in Quebec. So sorry, Cheryl, but thank you for asking. And Barb, and I can't see Barb's last name, says, I have all my grandpa's letters as well as my grandma's letters, postcards, and telegrams. So again, Barb, by way of Facebook, or if you can send take pictures of them and send the pictures to Sam. That would be terrific. Okay, I think we have answered all of the questions. So we'll just hang on for a few more seconds and see if anybody has a question that they want to submit. But if not, and I don't see any more coming in. So I'd like to then bring the presentation to a close. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this evening. And I'd particularly like to thank Sam for taking his time to put together a very, very informative presentation that I'm sure was of interest to everybody who was in attendance to tonight. So thank you, Sam. And I look forward to having all of you join us for our next presentation live from Hong Kong on May the 17th at 7:30 in the evening Eastern time. So good night, everybody, and thank you very much for joining in.
Thank you.